So one of the major questions that came up in those presentations is that, is surrogacy a gay issue? Because why are we there defending surrogacy as an LGBT association? I mean, notwithstanding what you just said, definitely we didn't invent surrogacy, and definitely we're not the only ones, and I doubt that we're, the majority really worldwide of people who are pursuing surrogacy, perhaps in the United States. I'm not even sure about that, but I'll accept the evidence though, because research is research. But is it a gay issue? And what we want to do here is, we have representatives of two associations that are phenomenal, and we've been collaborating with Our Family Coalition for, I think this is probably our 8th or 9th time here in San Francisco. And that's not a Men Having Babies association. It's an all gender, all orientations, well, I guess mostly LGBT, but still not as focused as us. And they have been, alongside with us in our effort to bring this kind of guidance and discussion to this group. And NCLR, as Deb was mentioning before, is, at least originally, an organization for lesbian rights who we've been collaborating with as well. So what we want to ask here are two types of questions. The first one is, as an LGBTQ, as a minority, which rightfully so, we can argue has been marginalized and discriminated, and in a position where we can say we need assistance. We have obstacles that are beyond what is the social, norm. We want to have this triumph. We want to have a family. But do we have extra responsibility, as Brent was also alluding, to make sure that we're not trampling over other people in our, does the end justify the means? And of course, the answer to that, the right answer is no. But as LGBT people, should we be even more responsible? Not just if we're a majority or not. So I'll start, open this first, because I think maybe, and Deb, you can think of other opportunities where we think that, we have responsibilities and as such, and also why you think, that, for you, is this something that is also of interest to you? Go ahead, Amy, first.
Well, I want to just take a step back and just be and just talk about like the issues when we talk about let's be ethical or let's be fair, or do we have more of a responsibility? LGBTQ community, LGBTQ movement isn't free of racism, isn't free of sexism. In fact, when we really look at the history of LGBTQ movements, you see how deeply racist, how deeply anti-Black it has been, how deeply sexist it has been, how deeply anti-trans it has been, even though our movements have started because of trans communities, of Black trans communities, people of color, women of color, right? And so these are the things that we have to first name these harms before we can talk about what is ethical. And then we also have to even think about our language, like change the way that we're talking about how we like you're not using a surrogate, you're partnering with a woman. You're partnering with someone who's consenting to do this journey with your family, right? And so we have to even think about how are we speaking about this? And then, I think not only do we have more of a responsibility, but I mean, everyone has a responsibility to constantly try to take a cultural humility perspective in how we deal with each other and how we deal with this in community with one another. We have to be in a constant state of learning. And when gay white men are saying, hey, I'm a minority, I really pause because, we have to think about it intersectionally, right? Like, yes, you're a sexual minority, but think about your other privileges. And when we talk to Black gay men, or we talk to Black trans women, like, there are so many other isms that are affecting their lives that we can almost scoff and laugh when we hear like our gay white male counterparts talking about being minorities. So when we think about the movement, we have to really think about our most marginalized groups, even within our own movement. And what are we doing to uplift those groups?
So here, and what I would add to that, so NCLR has spent, it was the Lesbian Rights Project when it started, and it started for the purpose, it was born from the experience of lesbians having their children taken away from them because they were lesbians. And so really the core mission of NCLR, and it does so many other things now as well, but the core mission of NCLR has been to protect LGBTQ people who are parenting, however they get there. And clearly, people who are having children through surrogacy, LGBTQ people who are having children through surrogacy are included in LGBTQ people who need protection through, need legal protection. And so, you know, that's pretty much our framework, and very consciously an intersectional view on that. And I can tell you that included, along with advocating for the things that were mentioned before that Ron was talking about in terms of getting better insurance coverage for medical treatment, we also have been very mindful of trying to make sure, I mean, in my law practice and also in my work with NCLR, I see gay men who are having babies by getting a friend pregnant with no doctors involved, with no clinics involved, with no lawyers involved sometimes. I see lesbians who are getting pregnant by sleeping with men. And we try to keep the entire scope of how people within our community actually have children, and recognition that we do it lots of different ways, and really keep that view on how do we make sure we're all protected? How do we make sure all of our rights are protected? The other thing I have to say in terms of what Ron was saying is the attack we're seeing on reproductive rights and reproductive choice and reproductive freedom, which the Dobbs decision was the bellwether of that in terms of outlawing abortion, and now we're seeing the first state just enacted a law banning the use of abortion pills.
Yep.
There are, if the state is allowed to attack access to health care, and particularly access to reproductive health care, that has an immediate impact on people looking to pursue surrogacy. It has an immediate impact on trans youth who need gender-affirming care. And the attacks are multifaceted. It's actually scared the crap out of me to hear that gay male couples are now the people who are most using the fertility services, because if that word gets out, then the attacks are going to ramp up. We're very aware that lesbian couples are using sperm banks far more than straight couples are now, because male infertility has largely been solved by this new system where they can take one sperm and inject it into an egg. So if a guy's sperm doesn't know how to swim, it doesn't matter anymore. So with that, it's single women and lesbians who need sperm banks, and as that word gets out, sperm banks are going to be at risk. So we're in an extremely politicized moment. Whether you want to be trailbreakers or, radical or not in your approach to life, you are in a position right now where you need to be aware. I will say that right now, when I see gay couples in my law practice who are being matched by programs with surrogates in Texas and Florida, I have to ask myself why. Why a responsible program would do that right now. It was not even a week after Dobbs came down that we saw within the surrogacy legal community the first case of a surrogate in Idaho who needed medical treatment urgently. Her life was in danger. The baby was not going to make it. And a network had to pull together to get her across the border to Oregon to get the treatment she needed. So when we talk about an ethical approach to surrogacy, when we talk about being thoughtful about keeping our surrogates safe, as well as keeping ourselves and our partners safe, we need to be looking at all of that. The risk we may be putting a woman in by carrying a child for us is very different if she's in Texas right now than if she's in California or Oregon or Washington State, where her access to her needed health care is not in danger. So I just want to make sure we're all mindful of the bigger context in which we're doing this.
Yeah, I do want to piggyback on that. I don't know how many folks are aware of this, and probably learn more about it tomorrow, but America has the highest maternal mortality rate, right? It's really dangerous to try to give birth in America. And it's even more dangerous if you happen to be a Black woman, right? And a part of that danger isn't even just in giving the birth, but is the lack of healthcare resources after the child is delivered. There isn't a lot of maternal care. So when we're talking about let's be ethical, it's not just, okay, great, the baby's here, goodbye, but what happens to that woman's body after that child has been delivered? There's a lot of care that needs to be taking place afterwards. And those things aren't available. One, because the healthcare system is just really poor in this country, and some states have it even worse, like Texas, right? And that's done intentionally, and it's done by design because the healthcare system is run by your state.
I want to touch upon something you said and something you, Mimi, said as well to also help us get to the next issue we wanted to raise. And first of all, yes, there is a point in time in which we could say as much as we want, egg donation is not, sperm donation is not a gay issue, surrogacy is not a gay issue, but we might not be persuading anybody because, I don't know if you know, but in Europe, over the last decade, where there were several instances where marriage equality or some instances civil unions were brought to a referendum. And many times the no campaign, the people who were trying to stop that progress, were rallying around surrogacy. They were saying, they were waving the flag of surrogacy, saying if you have marriage equality, you'll get more surrogacy, which of course everybody knows is bad. So we could pretend or try to advocate that sperm donation or surrogacy are not gay issues, but our detractors might, or our political enemies might not buy that. And I think what you just said, Deb, in that regard is very prudent. But also want to talk about the fact that I think white gay men this weekend were a minority here, not alone elsewhere. And that there is a misconception about the fact that surrogacy is a white, privileged, male topic. And men having babies is all about the fact that it's not just for the privileged, that we can't tolerate that it will be just for the privileged. But there are those stereotypes and those stigmas are allowed to persist. And alongside them is also a type of sexist approach that questions, should we be parents? Or is our urge to be parents equal to the urge of females to be parents? There is not a lot of empathy in society to people like us, to the point that we're not be defined by people's perceptions as childless when we're trying to have a child. Who's a childless person? Mostly a woman who can't become a parent because she has infertility issues. She might have a supportive husband, but he's not even considered by society most times as childless. And for us, not only are people not thoroughly convinced that we'll be, some of us, and we're not advocating for every gay man to become a parent, not by far. I don't even need to know that most gay parents want to become parents, most gay men want to become parents. That's not necessary. But we know that a lot of us do. A lot of us feel that our full human potential is not going to be, achieved without parenthood. That's how we feel. It's a natural, legitimate feeling to have. but it's being questioned by society. And sometimes possibly within our community.
Absolutely.
And that is our second question. We do have the obligation to think about intersectional, issues and the full picture and etc. But do we also have the right to ask our sisters and brothers in the LGBTQ community to try to better understand where we're coming from and join us, and of course I'm asking the wrong people because you've joined us already, in our attempts to fight this stigma, to fight these perceptions, and to also reduce some of these barriers. But maybe it seemed to resonate what I said before. I mean, do you think sometimes you see that attitude, or you think that that's something that might exist out there?
Yeah, I think, gay folks wanting to have kids and have a family are marginalized within the gay community because it's like, why? What are you doing and why are you trying to be heteronormative, et cetera? So there is already a stigma within the community when you want to say, no, I want to have children, I want to have a family. I mean, that is an issue. And just anecdotally, I mean, this is the problem of when we have these deeply sexist societies that say that men are not caregivers, men are not supposed to be wanting to have kids, or why does he want to babysit? Why is he looking at the kid? It's not a deviant behavior to want to love a child. I mean, it's actually humane. We should encourage that more. And just anecdotally, I'm a parent of a 4-year-old, so that puts me in rooms with lots of other parents, and a lot of time in rooms with a lot of straight parents. And to meet straight parents is to meet, a group of single mothers, essentially, because their male counterparts don't have to be involved at all. Whereas in our community, I just see this beautiful family structure that's really based on an egalitarian way of raising your kids, because we don't have to play gender roles. Like, we're both responsible for this child that we both chose to bring into this world or into our family, depending on how you choose to have a family, right? Surrogacy, adoption, in vitro, there's many different ways.
Can I add something to that? So we learned the hard way in California the importance of being proud and out about our parenting and our children, because in the fight against Prop 8, the powers that be decided it was too scary to put out publicly that gay people had children. And they hid our children.
Wow.
And they hid those of us who were parents. We were told not to talk about that. And it was because of what Ron said, is still happening in Europe to some extent, that this concept that if gay people can marry, will have children, means we shouldn't be able to marry. And that approach did not work at all. And in fact, what humanized us and made California shift was starting to understand us as parents and as families and meeting our children. And I have y'all beat, because my kids are 27 and 29. So I'm waiting to be a grandma. Don't tell them I said that. But it was really a learning opportunity and a lesson learned, frankly, that the next time our kids were right there in the front row, and people got to see us not in stereotypically gay ways, which is not as parents, but got to see us as families. And that made a huge difference.
Yeah, I think to your point about sharing the story about lesbians using sperm banks, I think it's a nice corollary to the fact that the reality is, regardless of how much our communities are using services or not, we are more visible when we use those services than other folks, right? So when you think about, as you described earlier, ICSI, or putting like one sperm into the egg, has kind of solved the problem of male infertility. So a heterosexual couple can go to a fertility clinic. Even if there's issues with the sperm, we can do an advanced technique. You can still have a genetic child. Historically, when that wasn't an option and folks used a sperm donor, a lot of times that sperm donor was kept secret. Like, people didn't want to share that they were infertile, that they had to use someone outside of the family. Whereas a lesbian couple or a single woman that's using a sperm donor, that's obvious. It's the same situation with a same-sex male couple. You didn't carry that pregnancy more than likely. Obviously, there are exceptions, and folks don't always appear their gender. But regardless of the usage of us using these services, it just becomes more pronounced. It's also sometimes something that we're proud of as a community. Like, you know, like a lesbian couple might have used a sperm donor that they know, and it's an important part of you know, it's a different kinship structure that they're proud of. A gay couple, I think there's a study that shows that anywhere from 70 to 90% of gay couples want to stay in touch with their gestational carrier because they formed a relationship. It's an important part of the family. Whereas a couple that comes to see me who's infertile, they may want nothing to do with the egg donor because it's a reminder that they were infertile. They may want nothing to do with the gestational carrier because they wanted to carry the pregnancy but had a medical reason that they couldn't. And these issues aren't specific to people that are infertile, but I just think they're very different. I think queer family building is so much more about a large community that's not just the nuclear family, right? Like, mom, dad, child. We're so much bigger and different than that. So I do think we can be allies with one another for sure.
100%. And I have to say, I have to train my staff because in my law firm, I have probably about 50-50 LGBTQ families and straight families. And I have to train my staff to have very different approaches with those two groups because, you know, the gay male couples who come to me, this is plan A. They're excited and they're happy and, you know, it's all good. And I mean, there's problem solving to do, but this is plan A. They're thrilled to be able to be on this journey. The straight couples who come are in mourning for the most part. They're processing grief at the fact that they've had to take these steps that they never expected to take to become parents. So I absolutely think that LGBTQ parents have an enormous gift to bring, certainly to the infertility communities, and also to parenting at large.
I want to tie to two of the issues we just heard. So first of all, what Brent was saying about visibility. And in fact, the position you're about to take is an example of how you can make, you know, and use visibility to produce better outcomes. Because, I mean, one can say, I mean, why do you need this kind of, separate but equal type of thing? Why do you need to have an LGBTQ family building? Why isn't it family building, period? I mean, aren't we all the same? But no, we are not at the point that we're treated the same, that people have the same expectations to us. We don't get to family building the same way as Deb was just saying. So it is accommodation, it is being mindful of those differences, but it is also visibility. And visibility is education, and visibility is also pride. And what Deb was saying is that when people started seeing us and seeing our humanity, not that we're obliged to have to prove that we're human, that made a big difference. And the other part of it is that indeed we're pioneers in many ways by being more mindful, coming to this in a different way, being more sensitive to how we come to this. We sometimes bring models of, you know, equality, of care, of breaking down gender stereotypes around care, and family structures, families of more than two parents, and all these other things are all issues that we're at a much better position to pioneer and do it, you know, proudly. There are people who are still going, heterosexual couples, through surrogacy with pregnancy pillows. That the prospective mom is walking around with a pillow that's progressively imitating stages of pregnancy so that they do not have to ever disclose that they needed the assistance of a surrogate. It has, you know, issues then with their children.
Yeah.
Because when you don't disclose to society, you're often tempted to not disclose to your children. And we're, of course, don't even have that temptation. But we're, I hope to think, are also more mindful. So I don't want to take too much of the time, as we are all behind, past a long, long day of a lot of information and stimulation. I just want to tie back to something we'll talk about more tomorrow, and that is that there is the potential now to have some progress regarding, for instance, IVF in the state, and our Family Coalition and NCLR are two of the organizations that are at the forefront with others to try to promote this particular bill. NCLR has teamed up with Men Having Babies and Resolve, the National Infertility Association. It's all about alliances, to come up with the original definition. In fact, thanks to Kathy Sakimura at the time at NCLR, we found a really good definition that satisfied what is so far been proven to be the needs we had for formulating something that will allow us to get more equal IVF benefits. And I'd like you to join us in that kind of advocacy. You'll hear about it tomorrow too, but soon there'll be a time to send emails and letters to legislators here in California. Those of you who've been here last year, we thought it's almost going to pass. Last year it didn't, so we're not going to stop. There are instances within our community. I'm going to say it here. Bay Area Reporter is refusing to report about our conferences because their editor thinks that surrogacy is despicable. And we've been spending thousands of dollars in advertising. They take our money, but they wouldn't report about it. It's your institution. It's our main media organization in this area, of this community. Yet somebody's misconceptions about surrogacy allows them to decide on their own that we're not deserving of that kind of support. I may be wrong, but I'd like to be proven wrong. But it's been 8 years that they've been refusing to cover our conferences. So it is our task as a community to fight these misconceptions and fight this skepticism, because if anybody wants, they can come here and listen and engage with us and find out whether surrogacy could also be an ethical path for parenting. So I will let you all say if you have anything to add, and then we'll wrap up and continue some of this conversation in different panels tomorrow as well. But if you have anything you would like to add before we wrap up.
Go ahead. Well, I just really want to say that it's really important that if you are making a choice to have a family, then you have every single right to have that family and to not do it alone. This law will absolutely get passed. I have no doubt in my mind, and it's all about coalition building and making sure that we support each other's causes, and that we really just push our legislators to do the right thing, right? And so when the time comes when we need you to rally, please rally with us. And when the time comes when you need our support, please reach out, because we have a lot of different support systems in place to help you have a successful outcome in whatever it is that you do want.
Yeah, and I will just say, I think San Francisco is a very fitting place for this conversation, and this was a big area of kind of the concept of families we choose, and I think when that was really becoming part of the conversation in the 80s, we still weren't really viewing gestational carrier and egg donation as a possibility, and so now families we choose for queer individuals now does include this other really beautiful way to build families, and I think obviously at this conference that's a major focus, but I think a big takeaway should be there's really no right way to build your family, and so there's so many different ways to do that, whether it's co-parenting, foster, adoption, surrogacy, and I think that the queer kind of fabric is that we're doing all of these things in a way that's really special, and so we're here to support people however you want to build your family. It doesn't have to be one way is the only way.
So, and being the Deborah up here, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but I will say, when my sons were in elementary school, our elementary school was the first public school we are aware of that had gay pride days. And we did these really sweet assemblies that were age appropriate, that all the kids loved. And Bill Withers' Lean on Me was like the song of the school, and everyone knew it. And I'm watching the whole Don't Say Gay thing going down in Florida right now, and having these intense flashbacks. And so, as the lawyer up here, I want to say, be careful, y'all. Take good care of yourselves legally. Make smart choices about how you're becoming parents, about making sure your children are protected, that each of you has a clear legal relationship with any children you're raising together. Yeah, just make good choices, because we're everywhere. We've made incredible progress, and it also is a little ugly out there right now. And so, and to Mimi's point, you know, depending on how many of the marginalized community boxes you check in, even more so. Just be careful, be proud, keep going, don't let anyone stop you, and be careful.
I couldn't wrap it up any better, so I'm going to invite Jenny now to give us a few housekeeping announcements before we release. Jenny, the first third of the